All right. Yes. So, my name is Mary Jo, and have been a Family Resource Center coordinator for 22 years, and for 21 years of that time, I have worked with kinship families. So it is definitely an area that I enjoy working in, and am passionate about helping these families, and so excited to get to share information with you. Um, and then the other, so in my Family Resource Center hat, I do have a support group that meets regularly throughout the school year. And then the other part where I work with kinship families is the GAP conference, the Grandparents as Parents Conference. And I've been involved with that since it started. And we just had our 19th conference last month in September. And that's a really, we get people from all over the state that attend that. We had about 250 people there this year, and I'm very proud to be a part of that, and would invite any of you to come and participate. It's a great conference. So if you have interest in that, or to let families know about it. So, all right. Do I advance my slides? That's what I'm not sure about. Can you guys tell
You
me?
could, right below, there's an
Oh,
arrow.
that arrow. I see it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So kinship, a complex topic. And I like this quote. When I talk to teachers, I always say, if you have a student that's being raised by a relative or a grandparent, there's a story there. And this kind of summarizes that: a necessity born out of tragedy. And we know that tragedy has no regard for location, ethnicity, religion, class, or race, because I think sometimes we picture certain families that fall into this kinship category. And really, I've, in all my years, run across from all shapes and sizes and forms of families. So just to set that kind of as a context for this discussion. And I really like this passage. It's um, from another grandparent book that we use sometimes, and so kind of describes, and I'll let you all read that, but I think it shows that sometimes these situations come out of the blue, where folks are put into the role of raising kids they weren't expecting to be raised, and sometimes these situations develop over time, and they kind of know it's coming. At some point, they may have to step in and take custody of of their grandchildren or nieces, nephews, and such. So, but that last part, it's the whether their arrival is slow or sudden, at some point it dawns on you you're no longer watching your grandchildren, you're raising them. So you're no longer, you take the grand out of grandparent, you are a parent now, and your life will never be the same, which is the bottom line there. That's okay. So I wanted to share this because it can be a little confusing when we start talking about kinship families. And I've noticed, and I'm working in this area a long time, that the names change, of course, over time. Right now, it seems like in Kentucky, we're tending to use the word kinship to be the all-encompassing phrase for these families. Nationally, you'll hear the word grand families quite a bit, to try to be representative of these kinds of situations where grandparents are raising kids, but you'll see them referenced all different ways. And a newer category that Kentucky um, uses is fictive kin for some of the children. These are children that are raised by folks that have a close like family relationship. So it can be a non-blood related person, of course, like a step parent, step grandparent. It can also be like a neighbor, family friend, a godparent. So now DCBS, or the Cabinet for Community-Based Services, can place children in a fictive kin placement. And so that might be a term you might come across, and wanted to include that. So if you had not heard it yet, it's kind of a newer category. All right, and I'm going to go through this stuff. So the reason why kinship care it's kind of commonsensical when you think about it, why it has been where the priority has been to put kids, if we need to find a place for them to go. is that kids do better in kinship care than they do in foster care, and the research has shown that. So to this point, so of course, there's less placement. Typically in foster care, a lot of kids go through multiple placements, but when they go into kinship care, usually there's more stability. They're more likely to, at some point, reunify with their parents, and then you'll see they have better behavioral mental health outcomes. So, all right. And the numbers. This is what people always want to know, like, how many kids are we talking about? Well, I always say the data is not great, but as far as like, I don't know how accurate it is because there's nobody truly capturing the data in a strategic way, but I wanted to give you a sense of how many kids we're talking about. So you can kind of see there, it's a lot. 2.5 million children is the estimate. That's nationally. I like that last part for you to think about, for every kid being raised by a relative in foster care, so that the state has officially placed the child with a relative. There are 20 more that are being raised where the state was never involved. The grandparents or relatives just took them in because they needed some place to go, but there was nothing officially that went through the system to place them. So we're talking about a lot of kids. In Kentucky, you'll see that we have one of the highest rate of kinship care in the country, approximately 96,000 children. So we're talking about a lot of kiddos. I've included some pictures along the way. I'm realizing I need to update some of these, but these are families of mine that I've worked with. So I wanted to show you some pictures of some families there. All right. And to give you a sense of who they are, a lot are still working, a lot are pretty young, 63% under the age of 59. So you're talking about folks that are trying to work still, raise kids. And a lot of them, 43%, are doing it for more than 5 years. So it's a longer term commitment on their part. This is an old slide, but when I look, I was going to take it out, but when I started looking at it, I just think it's interesting because we know from working in the schools, like our sense is that this population just continues to grow. And this slide is showing, it was published in 2011, so changes in a 10-year data. So I can't imagine what the date, I couldn't find anything newer. So I can't imagine what it looks like now. Just these huge increases that we're seeing in the number of kids that are living in kinship care. All right, and to get to the complexity of the issue, there's many reasons why kids may be living with family. The number one issue we see is substance use is the number one reason. And of course, some of these other, like incarceration, can be in conjunction with substance abuse, parental death, divorce, job loss, mental health, abandonment. I've seen that where the parent just literally says, I can't do it, and drops the kids off. This family in this picture, these kids are a lot older now, but yeah, it was a very neglectful situation, and the cabinet was involved in their placement, and the younger child's highly special needs child. So, but the common factor being the family crisis, where the parents can't or won't take care of the kids any longer for numerous reasons. So there is I'm not going to show the video, but I wanted to let you know that there's a feature that CNN did in 2017 on that features 3 local families in Lexington that raise their grandchildren. And so I have a handout page that is included that you can access, and the links are on there if you want to go and watch it. It's a short piece they did, but I think it's kind of they did a good job summarizing the issue and gives you a picture of some real families. So when you start talking about kinship care, some of the myths that are out there is that it's primarily an urban or minority problem. And of course, we know Kentucky being mostly not urban, and we know these families exist in every part of the state, that's a complete myth. And then, there sometimes you run across the idea that the grandparents did something wrong, but after, and it's their fault that this has happened. But working in this area for so long, that's just not the case. And, working with families where they have 3 grown children and 2 are functional and they're high flyers, and then one, has struggled with substance use, and it's nothing that they did any different for that child than the other 2. So we just know that's just not a thing. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, so the families themselves face a lot of complex challenges. And so I like this grandparent that said becoming a parent again is not their first choice, it's a last alternative. So it's nothing, anyone, of course, when you talk to grandparents, they're always like, of course I'll raise my grandchildren. They wouldn't want anyone else to be doing it, but it's not what they expected or wanted to do or planned for. So of course it puts a lot of like it says complex issues in place. First of all, financially, it's expensive raising kids, so you have that to consider. And I worked with one family where they literally had retired from the post office, bought their RV, had their plans mapped out, and then get a call from a social worker saying, like, we need you to take custody of your grandchild, and it was a baby. So they had to sell the RVs, completely revamp everything, and they ended up raising her till she was fully grown. I've known them since I started working in the school system, so she's fully grown now. So, completely changed their plans, obviously. And I had another grandparent that had to cash in her retirement because the financial needs became so great that she had retired and she had to cash it all in to make things work. So just lots of, as you know, kids are expensive. So a lot of challenges come up with the financial piece. Lots of legal issues to work through. Housing can become a challenge. I worked with a family that lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and got custody of 2 grandchildren and had to completely, had to move, find furniture. I mean, it just threw in a lot of expensive and complex things that they had to figure out. Of course, their health. Working in this area for so long, I see that the stress and the strain of raising the kids can put it can take a toll on the caregiver's health. So that's something that I've seen as a definite challenge. The list can go on and on. Of course, they're no longer a grandparent truly. They lose that role of being the one that can just pick up, do fun things with the kids, and drop them off at the end of a visit. Of course, the generation gap, things have changed when it comes to how you parent, technology, just how you actually discipline. All those things have changed. I've seen over the years the impact that it can have on the marriage. A lot of the grandparents I've worked with are remarried, and there's a step grandparent. So now you're asking a step grandparent to take on the role of raising these grandchildren that weren't their, wasn't their biological child's children. So it can put a strain on things, to say the least. And then you see all the emotions that go along with it. The future planning, what's going to happen to the kids if something happens to me. Their other adult children, I've seen where there can cause a lot of hard feelings that you're doing all this for these grandchildren now and not able to pay enough attention to mine. Just the list could go on and on. We could spend days talking about the challenges that they may encounter. And so I wanted to also include the positives. So you see, I don't think I could live with it if they went to somebody else. So, and it's a labor of love. So I think it's that sense of knowing they're safe and stable, they're with family. They can, part of why the kids do better is that piece about family stories and traditions. They get to hear about their family and know about them and their parents, whereas kids in foster care lose that sometimes. So that's an important link that the kids still have. And then in some cases it does. It gives new energy and taking better care. I had a grandma that was like, we're out biking, and she's had to take on some things that she had kind of thought she was too old for at this point, but decided to kick things back into gear in that respect. So, all right. There are a lot of immediate needs that can occur, of course, with the families. And I mentioned some things related to housing and furniture, just having clothes, basic clothes, because sometimes the kids come with nothing. Um, of course, they need school supplies, all the things, other kids need and such. So, and then a big piece of this, the mental health and the counseling, like the kinds of things the kids have gone through, and most of the time it's trauma related. They're probably going to need some counseling and services and support for these topics, as well as like I said, the list could go on and on. So lots of immediate needs that the kids may have. I'm not going to try to explain this financial benefit piece. It's very complex. The summary of it is there's not a lot of financial support for kinship families, unfortunately. There used to be a little bit more, but the state ended that benefit in 2013. And so there's a few things they put in place in the meantime, but it's limited as to who can qualify. But that's the discouraging part, is the financial support is very, very limited. I just wanted to point out that it is, and it's complex to try to figure out. As far as longer term needs, I think, support with parenting is a huge one, and how to parent kids that have been through trauma. That's a tough topic, and they need a lot of help with that. Finding good mental health services and counseling, therapists that are trained in trauma and know how to work with kids and families that need that kind of support. Sometimes the families will need in-home service, so services that can come into the home and provide support to the family. And of course, those longer-term financial, school, and then I mentioned before future planning. That's a big piece, is helping the families think about, let's have a plan down the road as to what's going to happen if something happens to me. Like, what's the plan? That gives, of course, I think both sides worry about it. The kids worry about it, and we'll verbalize it sometimes, and ask, and then sometimes the grandparents worry about it. And so giving them some avenues to try to figure those things out and come up with a plan is important. So when it comes down to libraries, I know that's why we're here today. I asked a couple different groups I work with that are kinship caregivers for input about what would be helpful from libraries and programs like that to help them and support them. So I let them come up with suggestions, and I compiled these for you. So their number one, and I talked to so I forgot to tell you, I do facilitate a group also for the University of Kentucky. They have a newer kinship support program, the University of Kentucky does, and they offer virtual support groups, so online support groups for kinship caregivers. These are statewide, offerings. And so I have a group I meet with once a month for UK, and I have people from Winchester and Lexington and Louisville that get on that meeting. So I asked for their input, and then I asked for my local schools, my support group I have for my schools. So their number one thing they identified is that they just need information. So I think a lot of time kinship caregivers, they get the kids, and then they don't get a lot of information about where to go for help. And they don't know necessarily. I know I'm like, well, the Family Resource Center is here to provide this for you, but they don't even know sometimes that there are family resource centers. So helping them connect with those places is key. And one of them said, I remember she said she was part of a support group that met at the extension office, and one of the grandparents in her group had put together a resource list for, I think she was from Versailles, and had put together a resource list for her area because she found it so hard to find help when she got the kids. So these are the kinds of things that would be good to include in a local resource listing, the kinds of needs we talked about. So just make, because I think sometimes we assume people know where to go to get help, and they don't, and they've never needed it before. So if you've never needed these kinds of services, you don't even realize that sometimes is out there, and you don't know where to go or even ask. So I think making that information available is really important. And I know it's hard though, because the resources change frequently. So trying to keep that up to date, but I think just connecting them any way you can with people. If it can't be something that you provide, connecting them with someone in the area that can provide them with that kind of information. Because what's difficult too is sometimes I've found that kinship families are reluctant or hesitant to take help. So I reach out to them in most cases because I know the financial piece can be such a strain, and it may not be immediate upon placement, because sometimes when the kids get placed, it's like, okay, we're okay, but then 3-4 months out, money starts getting tighter, and then I can reach out and say like, hey, we have a program for Christmas, could we help with some extra things for the kids? And they're like, well, we want to make sure the other kids have help first. And I'm like, no, we've got plenty of spots. I have to reassure them they're not taking somebody else's spot away. We have plenty of space for them, because they just, they want to be respectful of not taking help from others, but also like I sometimes have to talk them into it, like, no, this is for you too, and we can help you with this. So I think reaching out to them and asking if they need support is part of that piece sometimes. One of the suggestions they came up with was also offering, they mentioned offering groups, or I kind of added, or offering a space to have groups meet. So they mentioned like caregiver groups, and then groups for the kids and teens. And I think there is a need. I know in Lexington there is, and I'm sure all over, for the kids of kinship families to get together. And I think sometimes they feel very much alone, like they're the only ones they know that are going through this. So finding them an opportunity to get together, even if it's social more than just like more mental health focused, it can be just something where they just, all they really have in common is that aspect. You don't have to even do anything more in depth as far as like a curriculum or a treatment or that kind of a structured group. It can just be a gathering kind of thing where they get to know each other. So I know libraries often host all kinds of programs, so they having a space or offering those kinds of services, partnering with other entities, the extension office. Thought I put that somewhere. The extension offices are statewide, and they have recently been training their agents on a curriculum called PASTA, which is Parenting a Second Time Around. So they do have some structured programming through that curriculum that they can offer to kinship families. And I think sometimes finding a space to meet, though, if they can't meet at the extension office, a library would be a great place, a school. So just finding opportunities to partner and offer those things would be great. Okay, the next thing, the category they mentioned were kinds of programming things. So homework help and tutoring. I know you got libraries often offer these kinds of services, but just know that the kinship families identified these as things that would be helpful. So homework help and tutoring, some kind of caregiver day or night out kind of activity, after school activities, story times. I like that this person said story times featuring different kinds of caregivers, so representing different kinds of families, and then summer kind of activities. And then, all right, and then the other part on there I included were books and information that I've come across, and I wish I could give you more, but to be honest, I have not found a lot of great kids books on this topic, but there is a new one called A Grand Family for Sullivan by Beth Tyson. And Beth Tyson was our keynote speaker at our GAP conference last month. And she wrote this book because she's a therapist, and when she started looking at the books that were written for children that are kinship related, she said there wasn't anything out there that incorporated the trauma aspects and tried to explain some of that to kids in a kid-friendly way and such. So she wrote a book. So I wanted to let you know about it, and it's available through Amazon. It's something that I think it's kind of like a self-published book, but we were able to secure funding for the GAP conference this year to buy 200 copies of her books and give them to the families that attended. So we've gotten her information out there a little bit for those families, but I wanted to mention that because it's a new thing I had not heard of until a few months ago. And then I think libraries offering any kinds of good resource books on trauma and grief that are family friendly, parent friendly kind of books for them to access to understand it better, for kids to understand those topics better. And then one of the grandparents said they wanted to have books that talk about drugs and addiction. And I don't know. I don't know if those exist, but that would be something great to offer is so kids can understand that aspect of what's going on in their situation with their parents. And then I think I added self-care because I think that's such a big piece of what kinship caregivers need and kids need things they can do to take care of themselves that are practical, affordable and practical and can be implemented. Those are always, or just like an information or a display about those kind of topics would be super helpful. All right, and this is some information that I've come up with, that other ways to support kinship families are when you're doing programs and services to be really, well, that's my second point, inclusive. So be very inclusive with the language that we use. I try to preach to my schools and teachers all the time, like to be sensitive about this, because the moms and dads activities can be very triggering for our kids that are in these kinship families. So I found this visual recently that gave some other ideas for those traditional muffin with mom and donut with dad titles that I really liked, that there's plenty of other wording we can use that's more inclusive and can make kids feel like, okay, I can be a part of that even though mom's in jail or mom's deceased, or and I can bring my grandma, or I could bring somebody else to those events. So my first point on there, be sensitive to the fact that this is not their first time parenting. And I think that's just something I've learned working in this area a long time, is that these kinship caregivers, for the most part, have raised kids already once. So just approaching how we help and provide services in a way that's sensitive to that fact is really important. I encourage self-care. I talked about that. Any opportunity we can do to encourage them to take care of themselves is super important. They want to put the kids first, which I get and I understand, but if they don't take care of themselves, I'm always preaching to them, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be here for the kids. So anyway, we can come up with ways to encourage self-care is crucial. And then this is just, if you're encountering kinship families and have the opportunity to tell them and give them ideas of how to organize and keep records and documentation, keep receipts, keep notes, as simple as using a calendar, like a wall calendar, and writing notes on it as to what's happening with the kids in their situation. Because if they have to go to court at a later date and need that documentation, they've got it. Because it's awfully hard to backtrack. Keep text messages, keep all that stuff. So if we can come up with ways to encourage that, I always put that out there because it's a key piece that families sometimes don't realize they're going to need down the road. So, Okay. So I mentioned briefly the GAP conference. I wanted to show you a little bit about that there, that we have that. It's in Lexington, but like I said, it's for anyone statewide. It's very affordable to attend. And we only charge the Kinship caregivers a nominal fee, and we can waive it, but it's so people will come and show up when they sign up. So um, we have a Facebook page, so you're encouraged to like us on Facebook, and then we update that. We also have a good website, and so you can get information there about the conference, and please share with anyone you come across. And then I mentioned briefly the Kinship Resource Center. Um, this is a great new resource that UK has. It's actually during COVID that this has all been coming together. So there's three aspects of their program. One is the virtual support group. That's the Kin VIP program. That's the one that's shown there in the middle. So that they offer a variety of support groups at different times they are online. So one thing I'm thinking of is that some of our kinship families have trouble with technology and accessing that. So that might be a way to support people and say, like, you could come use the computer here at the library to do this. Like, or I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think that could be a barrier for some families is getting on the meetings. But I want you to know that it exists, and that's a resource for them. The other is the Kinship Catalog, the virtual training series. So every month they offer these great, fantastic trainings on topics that caregivers need. They record all the trainings, and they're available online through this Kinship Catalog. So, I mean, they cover everything. I've been really impressed with the quality of the speakers and the topics that they've covered. So there's a great amount of videos already up there for people to access. The third part of this program that they've created is the Kentucky KINS program, peer support. So UK, there are actual kinship caregivers that they have hired and are on employees now, and then they provide peer support to kinship caregivers. And that is something that I think they still are looking for caregivers to be a part of. So you can tell people about it and refer people to that program. Okay, so on the handout that I gave to be uploaded, it includes the UK Kinship Resource Center website, as well as the instructions, because here's the barrier I see. UK has set this up in a way that there is a lot of, you have to register and have an account, verify the account, and then when you go in to sign up for the support group, you have to like basically shop for it. You shop for it, you put it in your cart, you have to check out. They've made it pretty complicated. So I think sometimes our caregivers are going to need help with that process. So I included the directions in there. So if they ever have the opportunity, hey, there's this great resource you might want to access, and I can help you get started, and so I gave you the directions on how to do that in that handout. And then other resources, of course, I hope you know about family resource centers, and there's now 850 of us across the state. So if you, hopefully you're connected with your local people in your community. I mentioned that UK has extension offices. They're also statewide with that PASTA curriculum, parenting a second time around. And so even if the local agent isn't familiar with that or says they don't know about it, they can reach out to the state office at Cooperative Extension and find out about how to get that going in their community. There is a statewide coalition, the Kinship Families Coalition of Kentucky. It's a great website that has listing of support groups and a resource guide that can be downloaded and printed out for families to access. And the resource guide is also on our GAP conference website. And the resource guide on our website is broken down by category. So it'll have a link for legal and financial and other information. So, and the whole thing can be downloaded off of that and printed as well. So we give out hard copies at the GAP conference to anyone who's attending for the first time, but I still think, not everyone knows about that resource and how to access it. So I wanted to share that. And then there is also the Kinship support hotline that is part of something that DCBS, the Department for Community-Based Services, offers. And I wanted to give you that phone number you could share with families if they need to access more information about kinship supports that are available through the state. Like I said, there are limited, but there might be some ways they qualify for child care assistance, food stamps, Medicaid. Medicaid should be a given. All kinship kids should qualify because they do not take into account the extended family's income in those cases. So the kids should have insurance. That's a given. So, but there is a phone number and available to those families to access some of that information. And then the last two websites on there are national resources about kinship care, places you can get national data and state by state data and different programs that exist nationwide. So I wanted to share that if you've never come across that. So, all right. I think that is it. And then I have my name, phone numbers, email, and you feel free to reach out to me at any time. If you have a specific question or something I went over too quickly. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I don't know how this works exactly, but I'm looking at the chat. So if you have any questions, you can ask me there.
Yeah, they can chat them in, or they can put on their mic and ask, raise their hand, whatever they like.
I encourage you to, if you haven't worked with, I'm sure you've come across kinship families in your work, but I encourage you to reach out to those if you haven't, or find ways to serve them. It's a very rewarding population to work with. They're very appreciative of help and support that you can give them. Like, I can't tell you, more than any of the other families I work with, they just appreciate anything you do for them and ways to help. So I just don't think they know sometimes to ask and don't know what to ask for. So that's why encouraging them to reach out, or I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's a much needed, they need a lot of support. So I encourage you to find a way to help them if you haven't been already. Anything we can do, help the kiddos out. I just ironically, before I got on this meeting, had heard from a grandparent who's the mom just passed away. Gosh, it's only been about 3 weeks ago the mom passed away, and I guess the state is involved. They said you have to have a bed for her by Tuesday. So I put the word out to my staff, and within 2 hours we have a mattress for her. So there's lots of ways we can help, but it's just finding out the need is there and figuring it out and getting those things in place for them. But appreciate you all listening to me. Please reach out anytime. Call me, email me.